Thus it is, Ankalime, and we cannot alter it. For men fashioned Númenor, men whose heroes of old they sing of. Of their women we hear less, save that they wept when their men were slain. Númenor was to be a rest after war, but if they weary of rest and the plays of peace, soon they will go back to the great play, manslaying and war. Hey there, children. Welcome back.
Children?
It's a cult, don't you know? We're the fathers of a cult.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Welcome to Keep on Tolkien, guys.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Joel N.
And I'm Danny J.
And today we've got a pretty exciting episode.
Yeah, I would call it obscure. Would you say this is the most obscure story we've covered yet?
Yeah, of the official stories. Yeah, this is definitely more obscure. I mean, it's out of the unfinished tales.
Yeah. So, by definition, guys, spoiler alert, this tale is not finished. So there's no real ending to this story, but there's a lot of details that lead up to the end.
Yeah, and it's a really cool story because it's one of the only stories we get out of Númenor.
Yeah, it's actually the only surviving, even somewhat intact tale of Númenor. That's not like a broad history of the island.
And of course, we're talking about
Aldarion the Mariner.
I think in the Unfinished Tales, it's called Aldarion and Erendis.
It's called The Story of Aldarion and Erendis, the Mariner's Wife. And yes, it is in the Unfinished Tales. And like we said, it takes place in the Second Age, Second Age Númenor. So today we're going to be referring to some places and things of Númenor. So if you want to know more about that, you could go back to last season and listen to part 1 of our Kingdoms of the Dunedain series.
Oh yeah.
And learn all about the geography and history of this lovely little island where this story takes place.
We were really big fans of the Kingdom of the Dunedain series.
I think it's awesome. Like, I listened to it.
Super proud.
Yeah, it's great, guys. Go back and listen to the Kingdoms of the Dunedain. We did a lot of research for that, and it was really fun.
Yeah, I think that's just one that we really enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
Which is why we like it so much.
Mm-hmm.
But Aldarion and Erendis. So let's start with who Aldarion is.
Aldarion, well, he's the 6th king of Númenor, and he's also the son of Tar Meneldur. He founded the Guild of Venturers, and he's the father of Tar Ankalime. And who was she, Joel?
She was the first ruling queen of Númenor.
Hell yeah.
She was, she was number 8 in terms of the rulers, but she was the first female ruler. And we'll find out why that is.
Yes. Let's get into some names for Aldarion, because like many Tolkien characters, he's named something in the beginning and never called that again for the rest of the story. So his true name, Enardil. Another name, Tar Aldarion, and also Anardilia.
Some of the titles that he got along the way were the Mariner, Lord of Ships and Havens of Númenor, and the Master of Forests.
So basically, like what we said in the beginning, pretty much the only source material we used for this episode is the story of Aldarion and Erendis, the Mariner's Wife, that is found in the Unfinished Tales.
Yeah, there isn't much information about this elsewhere online. We usually do a lot of online research.
We do a lot of cross research where we find stuff online and then look back at it in the book, but there's really nothing online to refer to for this story. It's pretty sparse, so it was a fun one to write. Let's get into the early years. Aldarion. He was born in the year Second Age 700.
He was the son of Tar Meneldur, his father, and Elmerion. Now, Tar Meneldur, he never really gave much of a shit about the sea. He was more interested in the heavens and the stars.
Yeah, really into staring up into the sky, as it were.
Even built a tower in the northern region of Forestar, and it was for the purpose of observing the stars.
Yeah. And Almarion, is that how you say it? I would say Almarion, right?
Almarion.
Yeah, Almarion. She's the daughter of Veantur, who is the captain of the king's ships under Tar Elendil. And so that was Aldarion's grandfather, and Aldarion was very close with him, as we'll learn in a little bit here.
Yeah, they both had a really strong love for the sea.
Yeah. He also had 2 sisters, which is, they're scarcely mentioned, but they have names.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see that, actually. Once again, just 2 more female characters that I didn't know were there.
And that is Alienel and Almiel. And Almiel actually had a son, Saranto, but we'll talk about him a little bit later because he comes into a little bit of the stickiness that this story gets into.
So Aldarion himself, he grew up swift and strong like the Dunedain of this age often did. Like we mentioned back in the Númenor episode, after the Edain were given the island of Númenor, they became the Dunedain, or the Dunedain, and they were gifted with a larger stature and super extended lives.
Super extended lives. They don't get sick. They were smart as hell.
They were just really big.
Yeah. They were men at their best. And here's a little excerpt from the Unfinished Tales about that.
Aldarion, for so he was called in all tales, grew swiftly to a man of great stature, strong and vigorous in mind and body, golden-haired as his mother, ready to mirth and generous, but prouder than his father and ever more bent on his own will.
Yeah, as you hear in that little snippet there, he was never super close with his father, Meneldur.
Yeah, they didn't have many common interests, and they didn't always see eye to eye either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he just kind of never understood Aldarion. Like you'll see as the story goes along, they're not on the same page about pretty much anything.
However, he did get along very, very well with his grandfather, Vayntur.
And he had a dope house on the southern firth of the Havens town, the port town, Romena. And it had like its own little bay where there was a bunch of ships moored. And Vayntur always traveled by water if he could. So like even if it was closer and easier to get there by road, he would sail along the coast to get there instead.
Yeah, he was a sailor. He had that love for the sea that Aldarion also had.
Yeah.
Hence why they got along so well.
And Vayntur taught much of the craft of shipbuilding and sailing to Aldarion. And he took to it really well.
Yeah, he got really good at it.
Yeah, kind of a prodigy. Here's a little quote from the Unfinished Tales about that. Before he was full grown, he could captain a ship of many men, sailing from haven to haven.
Yeah, that's really saying something. That's a talent.
Yeah, and they consider full grown 25, so I figure he's like a teenager.
So in his teenage years or his tweens.
Yeah. And like we said, Meneldur never understood the whole seafaring and shipbuilding game. He wasn't a fan of it. But he also, at the same time, didn't hinder Aldarion in doing so.
No, he was actually excited that Aldarion found something that he liked to do.
Yeah. I think they have kind of the same relationship that, like, Hank and Bobby Hill have. Because, like, Hank is definitely Meneldur. Like, he's very, like,
propane.
Yeah, propane. The stars and stars accessories. Let's look toward the heaven. Propane gas. Yeah, that's him. But he just doesn't really understand his son, and he's happy that he found something that will occupy his time.
A positive outlet.
Yeah.
I just don't understand how you can't be somewhat into seafaring and being a mariner when you live on an island.
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, that's kind of how people are with space exploration these days. A lot of people don't give a shit about space exploration. They live on a goddamn planet floating through space.
Yeah, but planet's a lot larger than an island. I just feel like...
Not in the grand scale of things, Joel. Space is huge. It's a tiny speck in space.
Okay.
Read Carl Sagan's The Pale Blue Dot, Joel.
I concede.
You have won me over with your superior logic. All right, let's get back into Aldarion.
So Aldarion's first voyage, it was when he was about to come of age, like we said, about when he was about to turn 25. His grandfather, Vayntur, that's how you say it, right? Vayntur?
Vayntur, that's how I say it, yeah.
So his grandfather, Vayntur, came to him with a really cool idea because, as it turns out, Vayntur was actually getting into what they call his twilight years. So he was getting basically to, like, Númenorian retirement.
Yeah, he's 200-some years old. Yeah.
So his grandfather suggested that they take a voyage together, sort of a celebratory voyage for both of them, coming of age and retiring. And we've got a little excerpt about that. I have in mind a way to mark it fittingly. My own years are far greater, and I do not think that I shall often again have the heart to leave my fair house and the blessed shores of Númenor. But once more at least I would ride the great sea, and face the north wind and the east. This year you shall come with me, and we will go to Mithland, and see the tall blue mountains of Middle-earth, and the green land of the Eldar at their feet. Good welcome you will find from Círdan the shipwright, and from King Gilgalad. Speak of this with your father. So here we just see Vayntur basically proposing the idea to him. Come over to Middle-earth and let's meet the frickin' king of the Eldar over there.
And also, you'll notice we name dropped
Círdan.
Círdan the shipwright.
Oh yeah.
So
we've been lacking on our Círdan references throughout the beginning of this season and late last season.
Yes, I would say that we have around 30 episodes that talk about Círdan at least once.
We try to shoehorn him in pretty much anywhere we can when we can remember to.
Because it's not easy. It's not hard to shoehorn him into things because he's got his hands.
Right. He's literally in Middle Earth throughout every single story that happens while the Earth is kind of a thing.
Yeah, and this story is no exception. Círdan comes into this one too, guys. So Aldarion goes to ask leave of his father to take the voyage to Middle-earth with his grandfather. Meneldur does not really want to let him go. He has a bad feeling about Aldarion taking to the sea.
Like we said, he's not much into the whole sailing business.
Mm-hmm. But he looked at his son's eager face and gave in. And this is what he said. "Do as your heart calls, Anya," he said. "I shall miss you sorely, but with Vaintur as captain, under the grace of the Valar, I shall live in good hope of your return. But do not become enamored with the great lands. One day you must be king and father of this isle."
So his father finally gave him leave to go on this trip.
Yeah, I don't understand what your little weird hobby is, but go on your little field trip.
I mean, I can see how that'd be kind of nerve-wracking, your kids going off for a couple years, because, I mean, a marining adventure is a long time.
Yeah, that's true. It's years.
So in the spring of the year 725 of the Second Age, Aldarion and Vaintur set sail to Middle-earth.
And they do it in this dope-ass ship called Númenor.
There you go. There's a lot of M's and R's and M's.
Yeah, but that means West Wings. West Wings, like the show, The West Wing.
I have a feeling it's nothing like the show, The West Wing.
So Martin Sheen isn't president then?
Not of Númenor.
Damn.
Not on this ship.
I think if we dreamcast this, we're going to cast Martin Sheen as Tar Meneldur.
I'm just trying to picture that.
The look that Joel just gave me was priceless. God, I wish this was television.
The wheels are turning, I'm considering.
So one of the things that Aldarion prided himself on is he kept extensive records of all the journeys that he ever went on, and they were all preserved in Romena until the downfall, where they were all lost.
For more on the downfall,
refer back to Kingdoms of the Dunedain, Part 1, Númenor.
Yeah, so ultimately there isn't much known of his first voyage to Middle-earth, other than that he made friends with Gil-galad and Círdan the shipwright. He also journeyed pretty far in Lindon and into the western part of Eriador, so he went inland a pretty good ways too.
Yeah.
He got a good feel for the land. But he didn't return for more than 2 years.
And this delay was chiefly due to the fact that Aldarion was learning every fucking thing he could from Círdan the shipwright, who is the man.
Goddamn right. Yeah, who better to sit down and try to learn from?
Yeah, especially if you're into the whole ship building thing.
Yeah, I mean, Círdan was one of the first elves to ever reach the sea, and he just stayed there the whole time. He just
stayed there, yeah.
And he's just been doing that ever since the elves reached the sea. So as long as the elves have been sailing ships, Círdan has been there.
Building them.
We're
going to try to not make this episode about Círdan.
It's just exciting that we finally get to talk. This is probably the only story where he is this heavily involved.
True, yeah.
Like, he's such a side character. Like, he's only, ever mentioned in most other places, but...
Yeah, he's the best auxiliary character of all time, in my opinion.
Anyway, Aldarion.
So there was great joy in Romena and Armenelos when they saw the ship come over the horizon as they were returning. Meneldur was happy to see his son, but he noticed a difference in him. He seemed to have an improved, physical stature, like he was a stronger man, and his eyes were brighter, yet... They kind of had 1,000-yard stare, like they kind of looked far. They were looking past you. They were looking things far away.
It kind of sounds like a similar thing, like when the elves see the light of the trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's this sea longing deep down in your soul.
So ultimately, when he gets back from this first trip, he's just totally sold about this whole marining thing. That's what he's going to do with his life.
It's him now.
But now he's back, and his grandfather Vaintur never set sail again. Like he said, that was kind of his last trip before retirement.
Mm-hmm.
His grandfather even gave Aldarion Númenor as a gift. He wasn't going to use it.
Right, he was done sailing. And Aldarion really tries to be a normal Númenorian prince, but it's never for him, and he's always looking toward the sea.
He's got that sea longing, always.
It's just too much. Within 3 years of being home, Aldarion was begging to leave again.
But he's also considered a full-grown adult now, so he can kind of do what he wants.
But he's always got to make sure his dad is cool with it, because you don't want to sail away. You don't want to sail away without the blessing of the king of Númenor.
Right.
Well, I guess he's Meneldore's not king at this point. He's the king's heir.
But still, he's the king's heir, and he's also Aldarion's father.
Yeah, so you got to be respectful. Honor thy mother and father.
But ultimately, after being back for 3 years, he gets leave to go out on another sail.
Yeah, and he goes back to Lindon, and he's gone for 3 more years. And then he gets back, and what does he do? He leaves again, almost immediately. And this time he's gone for 4 years.
Yeah, and now he's getting pretty good at this sailing thing, and he's not content with just sailing to Mithland. He travels even further south along the coast of Middle-earth. He goes all the way down to the mouths of the Baranduin, which is the Brandywine. So this is kind of getting down the southern side of Eriador, right?
Mm-hmm.
Along the coast. And he even makes it all the way down to the Bay of Belfalas, and he goes and hangs out with the Nandor down in Amroth.
Yeah. And these are all areas later that become the North and South Kingdom.
Yeah, they become part of the kingdom of Gondor.
Yeah. Aldarion comes back to Númenor when he's 39 years old in SA 739. And he comes with gifts from Gil-galad to his father, because in the following year, Tar Elendil was going to relinquish the scepter to his son Meneldur.
And he was named king as Tar Meneldur. Anytime anybody becomes king, you get the title Tar, which is a Quenya prefix, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And Aldarion, he stays at home for some time because his dad is king now, and he's like, I want to, be home. And
yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff going on for them. He's part of the royal family directly now.
But while he's at home, he labors to make greater vessels and to improve all the havens of Númenor. Because one of the main things he was asking Círdan about was how to build seawalls to like build bigger cities on the coast. So the water wouldn't get them.
So not just about ships, but just living on the shores.
Building havens in general,
on the coast.
Yeah. But building ships and improving havens was not good enough, and the sea longing got to him, and he set sail yet again.
And after that, he just is pretty much constantly going off on different adventures. And eventually, he actually founds something called the Guild of Venturers. Because he's not the only Númenorian that wants to go out sailing. I mean, they're out on an island, so...
Yeah. So there's plenty of people with the sea longing there. And these are some tough fucking Númenorians. These are like...
The Guild?
Yeah, the Guild. Yeah. They're the toughest people around.
They are the mariners.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, they go so far away.
Yeah, we've mentioned previously about in the Númenor episode about how when the Númenorians started actually like going to all corners of the earth.
Yeah.
This is when that kind of stuff starts to happen.
Mm-hmm. And there's a great map of it in Karen Fonstad's The Atlas of Middle-earth, which you should all buy on Amazon right now.
I actually bought that recently, and it was one of the best books I bought to accompany, especially like the Silmarillion, because it's got everything in there.
And if you're a cartography nerd like I am, us cartography nerds, it's porn. It's so good. It's amazing. There's vegetation maps in there.
There's elevation maps?
Yeah.
Topographical?
Get it, guys. Seriously, Kieran Fonstad is a god. But yeah, these guild adventurers, they all wanted to see the unknown, just like Aldarion. We got a little excerpt from the text about that. Therefore he formed the Guild of Venturers, that afterwards was renowned. To that brotherhood were joined all the hardiest and most eager mariners, and young men sought admissions to it, even from the inland regions of Númenor, and Aldarion they called the Great Captain.
Yeah, they friggin' worshipped him.
Yeah, they friggin' worshipped Aldarion.
He was the one that started the guild. He was the one that kind of initially started going off on all these crazy sailing adventures.
Yeah, and they loved him for it.
So during this time, Aldarion constructs a new boat, and it's basically a home base for him, and he can have it harbored anywhere that he wants on the island.
Yeah, and he literally lives in the shit, and it's called Ambar, and it becomes pretty much the ultimate dude cave, and all the venturers hang out there, and it becomes the guild house of the Guild of Venturers. Most of the time, it was moored off the island of Tol Uinen, who is the Maiar of Ulmo. Check it out in the Valor episode.
But Tol Uinen is basically just a small island near the coast of Romena, so just off the coast of Númenor. And it was actually placed there by the Maiar we just spoke of, Lady Owainen.
Yeah. And in the guild house, known as Eambar, / Aldarian's apartment, he keeps crazy detailed records of all the journeys that the Númenóreans do.
Yeah, and while he's building up this whole sailing society and going out on all these adventures, he starts to become pretty estranged from his father. And we've got a excerpt from the Unfinished Tales to back that up. Tar Meneldur looked coldly on the enterprises of his son, and cared not to hear the tale of his journeys, believing that he sowed the seeds of restlessness and the desire of other lands to hold.
And while Tar Meneldur is being a dick about his son's passions,
He's being unsupportive.
I'm being unsupportive, his mother is actually very supportive. And Meneldur allows it to continue, partly because his wife wanted him to, and partly because the Venturers were actually gaining so much esteem in society, it would be an unpopular move to talk shit about them.
Yeah, they were like superstars.
Yeah.
Like sports stars.
Yeah, kind of like athletes or something.
Yeah.
They're the Rangers of the Sea.
Yeah, they become really popular among the people of Númenor. And the Númenorians actually give them a nickname, the Uinendili. Oh boy.
I think it's Uinendili.
Uinendili.
Which means the lovers of Uinen.
Yeah, their popularity kind of made it hard for the king to rebuke the sailing. Because, I mean, he'd have to just rebuke everyone.
Yeah, and he'd have to make an extremely unpopular move. So Aldarion is gone most of the time with the Venturers. But while he's gone, Meneldur pulls a pretty dick move behind his back.
Yeah, so while Aldarion is gone with the Venturers on one of their adventures, his father Meneldur puts a ban on the cutting down of all trees on the entire island, which is how the guild makes their boats.
Right, you need that lumber to make those boats.
Yeah, and this plan backfires pretty hard on Meneldur.
Yeah, because Aldarion is essentially like, oh, I can't cut down the trees here anymore? Fine, I'll find my own trees. And he sails off to Middle-earth to do just that.
One more excuse to go sail over to Middle-earth now. That's where I got to get my lumber.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot more trees over there, too.
And during this time, Aldarion sailed down the coasts of Middle-earth to the mouth of the Gwathir River. And this is when he established the haven of Vignalande, which means New Haven.
So a little later, in the year 799 of the Second Age, Meneldur commands his son to stay in Númenor for a while. He gets fed up with all these adventures, and he straight up uses his kingly power to command that his son stay in Númenor.
And he does this because he means to name Aldarion the king's heir when Aldarion turns 100 years old, just like his father did for him. And that was in the following year that was going to happen.
Yeah, so they were just 1 year out from Aldarion's 100th birthday, so that's why he wanted him to make sure he's here, because I want you to be here so I can pronounce you my heir when you turn 100. So during this time, Aldarion is stuck back in Númenor. Him and Meneldur, they actually get a lot closer, ironically. It actually worked out to the advantage of Meneldur, because, I guess both of them, they got a lot tighter. They spent more time together.
Yeah.
We've got an excerpt from the Unfinished Tales about that.
Then Meneldur and his son were reconciled for that time, and there was peace and joy among them. And amid joy and feasting, Aldarion was proclaimed heir in the 100th year of his age, and received from his father the title and power of the Lord of the Ships and Havens of Númenor. So that's when he gains that title, Lord of the Ships and Havens of Númenor. Yeah, power up.
At this point in Aldarion's life is when we get introduced to Erendis.
Here she comes, just a-walking down the street,
singing, ooh,
my name is Erendis.
That's not what I was going for.
That's terrible.
Oh,
That's
man.
awful.
Well, let's cut that out.
Ooh.
So during this massive feast that was happening when his father announced that he was going to be the heir, a friend of their father's by the name of Beregar shows up with his daughter Erendis.
And they're from the westlands of Númenor, which is more like the farming and pasture, sheep herding area of Númenor.
Yeah, they're not from the line of the kings like Aldarion and his father and his father's father. They're actually from the house of Beor.
Right. And we know Beor. That's where Baron and Barahir are from.
Yeah, we love that house.
And it was said that Erendis was actually the most beautiful woman in that house since Morwen, who is we know as the mother of Turin Turambar. And she's actually described as the most beautiful of mortal women, I believe. So
Morwen?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. She's supposed to be quite attractive.
So the House of Beor, they had longer lives than most of the houses of the Edain back in Middle-earth, but nowhere near the a length of time that the family of Elros gets.
Which is, a ridiculous lifespan.
And that's the family that Aldarion belongs to.
Yeah, the line of Elros, yeah.
So this is just kind of setting things up for trouble.
Mm-hmm. And Queen Elmarion, she takes note of her beauty. She says that she's dark-haired, of slender grace, with the clear gray eyes of her kin. Remember, Morwen was also known for the gray eyes.
And Erendis is almost instantly enamored of Aldarion as soon as she sees him. An excerpt from the Unfinished Tales. But Erendis looked upon Aldarion as he rode by, and for his beauty and splendor of bearing, she had eyes for little else.
So Erendis at this point actually enters the house of the queen, and she finds favor with both the king and the queen. But she doesn't see Aldarion all that much. Here's a little excerpt. But little did she see of Aldarion, who busied himself in the tending of forests, being concerned that in days to come timber should not lack in Númenor. Because that's what Aldarion was up to now. His new hobby while he's at home is making sure the trees are all good so they'll have wood to make their ships.
Yeah, it's kind of what he did to deal with the fact that he couldn't sail. I've really got to keep myself busy.
He's really into, the forests and reforestation and sustainable. He's the Smokey the Bear of his time.
So during this time of not sailing, the guild begins to grow very restless. They were really upset that Aldarion wasn't commanding them and, coming with them on going out on all of these adventures. They were forced to sail only around the island and the surrounding seas, and they really wanted to make one of their journeys back to Middle-earth.
Yeah, they were all about going back to Middle-earth.
So 6 years after Aldarion is named the king's heir, he finally just becomes determined to return to Middle-earth. He can't handle it anymore. He's got to go out and set sail.
So he asks leave of his father, and he gives it begrudgingly. The king wanted him to stay in Númenor to find a wife, because he's getting to be about that age. But Aldarion straight up refuses, says he's not interested in that at this juncture. I politely decline your offer, father. I am not interested in wives at this juncture. Thank you very much. But so he ends up setting sail in Second Age 806, which is in the spring of that year.
So before he sets sail, he goes to his mother to say farewell, and it so happens that Erendis is with her. And he looks upon Erendis and senses the strength that lays within her. And we've got an excerpt from the Unfinished Tales to back that up. Then Almarion said to him, "Must you depart again, Aldarion, my son? Is there nothing that will hold you in the fairest of mortal lands?" "Not yet," he answered. "But there are fairer things in Armenelos than a man could find elsewhere, even in the lands of the Eldar. But mariners are men of two minds, at war with themselves, and the desire of the sea still holds me."
And as he says this, Erendis believes that these words are directed at her. So from this point on, she just falls so in love with Aldarion. He's everything to her. He's just the moon, sun. The moon and sun rise from his butthole, as they say.
Sun shines out of his ass.
Yeah, is that what they say?
The sun shines out of his ass.
It's not the moon rises out of your asshole? No?
No, but we should definitely coin that. I mean, it kind of makes sense.
But yeah, she was out of the dating game. She didn't seek men at all and dismissed all suitors.
Yeah, she was totally smitten by him, and she was just going to wait for him. And she did wait. Aldarion was gone for 7 years.
Yeah. But when he does return in 7 years' time, Aldarion brings back many treasures. But Meneldur kind of disses him and says, I would have rather had my son by my side than all these cool elven treasures. Like, I don't need gold and silver. He tells him right to his face. He's like, we don't need gold and silver. We got it. I want you back here with me.
Yeah, they get in a bit of a disagreement at that. And Meneldur says that Aldarion has to stay and learn more about the land and its peoples if he's going to be king of it. And he pressures Aldarion to take a wife so that they can provide an heir, so they can keep this whole ruling business keep going.
And he also reminds Aldarion that, hey, we were gifted this island, and we live here by the grace of the Valar.
Right, it's a pretty great place.
It's a pretty great place. Like, why are you always trying to leave it all the time?
And this whole conversation just doesn't go well, and it really pisses Aldarion off, and he doesn't talk to his dad for a while. And he goes out and he lives out on his houseboat, Eambar. And he spends a lot of time with the Venturers again, and they're pretty happy about it.
Bros. And they get together and they build a crazy huge ship.
A new ship
That they call Palaran, which means the Far Wanderer. But during this time that he's estranged from his father, Aldarion and Erendis see each other quite a bit. And this was kind of manufactured low-key by the queen, you know. You know how your mom would like try to do that? Try to set you up with somebody? She's like, oh, Joel really likes this girl over here. Maybe I'll invite her over for dinner or something.
No, actually, my entire life has been quite the opposite.
The opposite?
Yeah, no.
Cock-blocked for
I wasn't
the whole life?
allowed to hang out with girls for a very long time. That was my life as a child.
Well, anyway, I from what I read, moms do that.
My understanding is.
From my understanding. Neither of me or Joel had a normal childhood, so it's fine.
But Aldarion's mom's pretty sweet, trying to set him up. And it looks like it worked out pretty well. She hoped that Erendis and Aldarion could, work things out, and maybe it would cure Aldarion's restlessness. Maybe he wouldn't want to leave the island so much.
But Meneldur actually points out the difference between lifespans and notes that it could be a huge problem in their relationship, especially the way Aldarion likes to leave for 7 years at a time.
Yeah, like keep in mind, like we said, she's from the line of Beor. They don't have those cool. They have extended lives, but not quite as extended as the line of kings that Aldarion comes from. So he's gonna be alive for a lot longer than she is.
But when that dope-ass boat Palaran is finished, Aldarion means to set sail yet again. And this really pisses off Meneldur. But he ultimately agrees to not use his power as king to stay him. And that's only because his wife, Almerian, made him.
Yeah, otherwise he would do it again. And that brings us to a little Númenorian tradition. This is one of the things I loved about this story, since it's one of the only stories we get out of Númenor. We get a little more about Númenorian culture.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
So there's a tradition that the Númenorian ships that set sail away from the island, when they set sail, a female member of the captain's family places a wreath called an Oiolarie.
I think it's, yeah.
No.
Oiolaire. Yeah,
I think that's close to
Oiolaire, yeah.
Oiolaire.
And they put this on the bow of the ship. It's a bow that they put on the bow. Isn't that funny? I used the word wreath in this part of the thing because it says bow of the ship, and I didn't want to get confused.
They put a bow on the bow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just kind of a nice traditional ceremony, just a sending off of the ships. And this signifies the ever-summer. It's a token of friendship of Osse and Oinen. So presumably it kind of gives you the favor of the sea gods, gives you, a better journey.
But Meneldur bans all the female members of Eldarion's family from placing the bow. And he refuses on the bow. Yeah, placing the bow on the bow. Isn't the English stupid? Is there any English as a second language people out there listening that's just like, God, this language is dumb? There's like 3 different bows. Anyway, so he's putting the bow on the bow. There's nobody to put the bow on the bow. Because he basically looked at it as Aldarion was leaving against his will.
So Erendis gets the bright idea. She tells the queen that if she could go get the branch to make this, she could bear this wreath to Rowena.
Yeah, she's like, if you cut the tree and make the bow, I will deliver it for you.
Yeah, so she's basically offering to go down in secret since none of the family of Aldarion can go. And initially the Venturers were not fans of this whole lack of a ceremony. They really wanted to make sure that we get this traditional ceremony done before we go on the trip. Otherwise, it's kind of like bad luck.
But yeah, as they're about to set sail, Erendis shows up in the harbor. It actually says in the text how much she hated the harbor.
Oh,
she
really?
hated the noises and the sounds of the sights and sounds of the harbor.
So Erendis not having a good first impression of the sea. I suppose it's probably not her first impression, but
yeah, she's not all about it. And Aldarion, he greets her with amazement and joy. And she says to him that she comes on behalf of the queen. And Aldarion's like, oh, no shit, cool. And he looks on her with love for the first time. And as they sailed away, he stood long at the stern of the ship, watching Númenor shrink into the distance. And that's the first time they ever mention him doing that, ever looking back as they sail away.
He's usually so excited to get going.
Yeah.
So on this particular journey, it said that he actually hastened his return, and he was gone for less a time than he was supposed to. One of the few times he actually cut his trips shorter. And when he returned, he came bearing many gifts. And the best one was obviously for Erendis. And it was a massive diamond.
Yeah. And it was given to him by Gilgalad. It was a huge fucking diamond. But Meneldur wasn't cool with this huge gift, because he said it was unfitting of a king's heir to give such a gift, unless it was a gift of betrothal. And this is how Aldarion replied. "In gratitude I brought it," said he, "for a warm heart amid the coldness of others." Yeah, he was basically like, since y'all were being dicks, she was being nice, so she got the good present. Get over it.
Rubbing it in. So Aldarion decides that he's going to leave on another trip now. He's not back for long, and he's already kind of had it. And he plans to do more work on his haven, Vinulonde, that he started to construct.
And before the winter of that year, Aldarion leaves with 7 ships in direct defiance of the king.
Yeah, he takes almost all of the venturers with him.
Yeah, it's like almost all of them are gone. 7 ships, that's significant too. The number 7.
Yeah, and this time the queen didn't dare defy the king and send any messengers down with that wreath. She just kind of let it be. So instead of a messenger of the queen coming to put the wreath on the bow, a cloaked woman delivered the bow to the bow, saying that it was from, quote, the Lady of the Westlands, a.k.a. Erendis. So Erendis got it done.
But right about now, Meneldur is pissed off. Real pissed. So he strips the title of Lord of the Ships and Havens of Númenor from Aldarion. He shuts down the guildhouse on Eambar.
Yeah, he straight up closes the shipyards in Romena, and he again forbids any cutting down of trees for shipbuilding on the entire island.
And 5 years go by, and Aldarion returns. But this time with that other significant number. 9 ships. Because he turns out he built 2 while he was in Vinulonde.
And all these ships were heavily laden with timbers from the coast of Middle-earth. He was just like, I'm just going to bring back my own wood.
Yeah.
And then as soon as Aldarion finds out what the king did while he was gone, well, now Aldarion's friggin' furious. An excerpt from the Unfinished Tales. "If I am to have no welcome in Númenor, and no work for my hands to do, and if my ships may not be repaired in its havens, then I will go again and soon. Soon, for the winds have been rough, and I need refitment." Yeah, and he meant that, so he leaves again in the same year. He didn't stay for very long at all.
But this time he takes off with only 3 ships. And only the most hardcore motherfucking venturers. Like the core group.
And this time there's no blessing for the bow. There's no bow for the bow.
How?
No secret messengers, no hooded ladies. Yeah, Meneldur straight up forbid all women from entering the haven at Romena, so no women were allowed to get anywhere near the ship.
And he literally posts up armed guards there. Like, they're about to slay anyone that...
Right. You can't bless this ship. What's that? Is that a wreath?
Phew! Just cuts her down with a sword. Like, Jesus.
And this time, Aldarion and his ships are gone for so long that people actually start to fear for him. Even Meneldur was really... uneasy about it. He was gone for 10 years.
Yeah, and Erendis feared that he had either died or just decided to live in Middle-earth.
Yeah, keep in mind Erendis is still around throughout all this, and she's still waiting for him.
Yeah, she's still into him, still waiting for him. It's been like 20 years almost at this point, I think. 17 years?
So at this point, she asks for leave of the queen. She doesn't want to spend more time in the family house, and she returned to her home in the Westlands.
So after 4 more years, making the total for this voyage up to 14 years total, Aldarion returns. But this time his ships are all fucked up, and he looks like he's really been through some stuff.
Yeah, not a whole lot is told about what happened on this particular voyage.
But what is known is he first sailed to Vinulonde.
And from Vinulonde, he sailed down the coasts, and he went further than any Númenorian had been yet. Sailing back north, he met some really, really bad storms.
Yeah, they almost shipwrecked near Harad, which is just south of Gondor, if you please. When they get back to Vinulonde, the seas have devastated it. And it's also been plundered by lots of hostile men. And this is when we first hear, in the Second Age, this is when we first hear this little whisper of things not going well in Middle-earth. Like, evil men are starting to...
show up in Middle-earth.
To show up in Middle-earth and, like, attack Númenorian colonies? Like...
what is this?
Yeah, what is this?
Melkor's gone.
Yeah, this shouldn't be happening. So trying to return to Númenor, he was blown back by the wind 3 times. And their wind's coming out of the west, really against you.
He is also struck by lightning.
Yeah, that happened too. He gets struck by fucking lightning, and the mast breaks off his ship, and it's no good. And they have to like repair it out in deep water.
Yeah, and they do make it back, but barely.
So since he's been gone for so long, and it looks like he barely made it back, Menildor is pleased that his son is returned safe through all the hardships, but he does rebuke him for his rebellion.
Yeah, he says that Aldarion caused him to forego the grace of the Valar, and he also risked the wrath of Ossë and Uinen, not only on himself, but he risked it on all of the men under his command. So he's basically telling him he was being pretty irresponsible.
Yeah, being kind of selfish, yeah.
But ultimately he does reinstate Aldarion's title as Lord of Ships and Havens of Númenor. He's happy he's alive. He's happy he's back.
Yeah. He also gives him the new title, Master of Forests. And this is actually where the name Aldarion means, where it comes from, because his name is Anardil in real life.
So up until this point, he's been going by the name Anardil.
Yeah, but when they tell the tale, they always say Aldarion.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you were talking about Feanor in childhood, you'd still say Feanor, even though he might not have been called that yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know him as Aldarion, but up until this point in his life,
when they start calling him Aldarion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that means of the trees, Aldarion. Literally, of the trees.
He's always planting those trees.
Aldarion's pretty bummed when he finds out that Erendis has left Armenelos. But at the same time, he was too proud to seek her out, because he knew he had been a long way away. He'd been away for a long time, and he figured if he did seek her out, it better be to ask her to marry him.
Right, because he'd been kind of putting off this thing for a while with her, because they've both they've both cared for each other for quite some time now. But he's always going off doing his little adventures.
Yeah, still not willing to be bound.
So he just avoids seeking her out.
But in the meantime, he goes to work to repair and neglect the ships and havens and the forests of Númenor.
Yeah, he had been gone for nearly 20 years, so there was some massive deforestation that happened because the people without him, for whatever reason, they weren't planting enough trees to make up for what they were cutting down. They didn't have the system down, apparently.
Yeah, they didn't know that you should plant 2 trees for every one that you cut down. It's not really a system as much common sense, I think. You should at least 2 trees for every one that you cut down.
Right, Aldarion always planted more than he cut, which was ultimately the point behind it.
Yeah. But one day while he's riding in the forest, he comes upon a woman that is cloaked in green with a large white gem clasped at her throat.
Initially, he mistook her for one of the Eldar, which sometimes visited that part of the island. They were on the west part of the island.
Mm-hmm.
But surprise, surprise, it's Erendis.
And he felt in that moment the love that he bore for her. And he saw up until now that his life had been, sort of empty.
So this is the point where he really falls for Erendis.
Mm-hmm. He submits.
Erendis and Aldarion, they ride back to the house of Berengar, her father. And that is where Aldarion officially makes clear that he is looking for a betrothal with Erendis.
But Erendis she was kind of leery. She was at the right age for marriage and the custom of her people, but she also didn't want to compete with the sea for Aldarion's heart and attention.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, she understands that the sea is a pretty big deal for him. She's been waiting for a long time, and he's always off going on all these trips. And he's made it pretty clear that that's like the most important thing to him in his life.
Mm-hmm. And she actually states that she will, quote, utterly defeat the sea.
Yeah, she finally decides she's gonna do it. She's gonna try to be with him, and she's gonna. What does that even mean?
Yeah,
overcome his love for the sea.
She has very violent rhetoric toward the sea. We'll see more of that later.
So during this time, Aldarion neglects the ships and the havens altogether. He also doesn't cut down any trees or plant any trees. He just kind of neglects his duties for a while. He's totally captivated by Erendis.
Aldarion, he actually begs Erendis to sail around the island with him in Eambar. And this is to honor the passing of 100 years since the founding of the Guild of Adventurers.
And Erendis agrees, but she really hates the whole thing. She's not a sailor. She doesn't like it.
And they set sail from Romena to Andunier. And they are greeted by Valandil, the Lord of Andunier, Aldarion's kinsman. And Valandil's actually the heir of... these are the guys that Isildur and Elendil are related to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He makes a really great feast for them. And at the feast, he actually names Erendis Oenenel, which translates to daughter of Oenen, and she hates it.
Yeah, and she spoke aloud to Valandil's wife, and she says, "Call me by no such name. I am no daughter of Oenen. Rather, she is my foe."
Once again, just hating on Aldarion's love for the sea.
And Aldarion goes back again to rebuilding Romena. And there he builds a lighthouse on Tol Uinen, and it's called Calamindon, which means the Tower of Light.
And so after his brief time away building this lighthouse, he comes back to Erendis and he again asks for marriage. And she responds with this one condition. "I have journeyed with you by ship, Lord. Before I give you my answer, will you not journey with me ashore to the places that I love? You know too little of this land for one who shall be its king."
And they journey together into the Westlands, which is like we said, is the pasture land where it's mostly farmers and sheep herders. And Erendis says, "Here I could be at ease." And then he responds with, "Well, as wife of the heir of the king, you can dwell wherever you want, baby." And then she comes back with, "Well, where will you dwell?" And he says, "With my wife." And he says, quote, "when his labors allow." And then she kind of gets mad, a little bit angry. And she says, "I will not share my husband with Lady Uinen."
So after this encounter, Erendis returns home and she speaks with her mother. And she says that she's having a serious all-or-nothing attitude about this marriage with Aldarion. But her mother tells her that she should share in Aldarion's love for the fire of his spirit. You should be happy that he loves something so much.
Yeah, and you should try to get into it too, if you can.
Support his habits, support his passions.
And the queen, who's actually friends with Erendis' mother, hears of this. And she invites Erendis back to Armenelos. Because she's actually pretty afraid that Aldarion's going to get depressed and want solace, and he'll want to sail away again. Because by this time, he had been ashore for quite a while. And there in Armenelos, she finally reconciled with Aldarion.
She finally accepted that they are going to get married.
Finally.
So Aldarion and Erendis, they make the significant travel to the Meneltarma, and the journey kind of marks their marriage, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and they travel in silence because, like we've said in the Númenor episode, only the king is allowed to speak at the top of the Meneltarma. So once their betrothal is sealed, they travel back to Armenelos, and he presents Erendis to Tar Meneldur as his betrothed.
And the king is super excited.
Super stoked, bruh.
And the entire city parties.
Party! And they party like only Tolkien characters can party, which I imagine are the best type of parties. As a gift of betrothal, Meneldur gifts Erendis with the lands of Emarie, and he builds her a great white house there.
And Aldarion asks Erendis what gift she would want, and she says that the gem that he already gave her is the only gem she could ever want. And she sets it around her brow, and she wears it for a really long time that way. And that's when she gets the nickname Tar Elstirme, which is the Lady of the Starbrow.
And for a time, there was great peace and joy in Armenelos. And they even said that the harvest and the fruits that were harvested that year were the best ever on record. And that year was Second Age, 858.
So he's, 158 years old now?
Yep, 158. That's why I love him, because he was born in the year 700. It's really easy to tell how old he is.
So pretty much everyone is super happy with this new paradigm. And, everyone except for Aldarion's venture bros.
Bros.
I mean, without Aldarion's money and his resources for the Venturers Guild, their voyages were pretty small and kind of shitty. So they kind of beg him to start tending the forests again so they can start rebuilding the guild and get things going. Because, I mean, the forests have been neglected for 15 years or so.
Yeah, since he last returned. And Aldarion, he returns to his duties. He starts doing the shipbuilding and the forestry and all the stuff that he normally does. And for a time, Erendis actually comes to the forests with him. But she stops going because she's really sad when they cut down the trees, even though they're planting more trees.
She likes the forests,
yeah,
but she doesn't like when they cut it down. And they've now been betrothed for 3 years. They're not officially married yet. They're engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And for Númenorians, that's kind of a weirdly long amount of time to be engaged, especially since it's not like he's been gone or anything.
No, yeah, they've just been dicking around for 3 years.
And after 3 years of this, Aldarion actually resolves to leave on another sailing adventure. And he tells Erendis that they'll get married when he gets back. But this time, he actually wants her to come with him on the adventure.
Yeah, why not? And he says he'll build a queen's ship for her, and he will show her the forests of Middle-earth, where Orome still hunts.
And she just kind of agrees to stay there and wait for him rather than going. She really is not about the sailing business.
Mm-hmm. So Aldarion sets sail in the spring, and Erendis this time herself laid on the bow, and then took a bow. But she hid her tears from him. She was crying. She wasn't happy about it.
Yeah, she wasn't happy, but she was trying to be supportive. So this time he's been gone. He leaves, and he's gone for 6 years. That's a pretty long time, especially considering 3 years was a long engagement, and now he's
they've
gone.
Been waiting 9 years to get married.
He's been gone for twice that long, and when he gets back, everyone is pissed at him.
Yeah, even his mom is cold to him when he comes back.
Yeah, when he gets back, the Venturers are no longer held in very high esteem among the people. They're not super cool anymore.
Yeah, and people in general just thought that Aldarion was a huge dick to Erendis, because everyone likes Erendis,
right.
And not everybody likes Aldarion. That's the thing. Like, his bros really like him, and he's got a lot of influence, but the people themselves aren't super into Aldarion.
And it was kind of a dick move, proposing to a lady, putting it off for 3 years.
Yeah, dude.
And then
what
just
are you doing?
dipping out for 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit or get off the pot, as they say.
Yeah, he said he was gone longer than he had initially planned, but he was getting some serious shit done over in Vignolande, over in Middle-earth. Because when he got there, he found it totally ruined, and once again, some evil men from Middle-earth were becoming increasingly hostile with the Númenorians and their colonies.
And he finally seeks out Erendis, but her reception is also cold. She looks at him keenly, but she doesn't actually come up to meet him. She finally does ask him to tell his stories, and they start talking again, and they soon become close again.
Yeah, they're still in love. It's been a very long time. But finally, in the year 870, so he's 170 years old, finally Aldarion and Erendis get married in Armenelos, and the whole city goes fucking nuts.
Yeah, they said every house had music, all the streets were filled with men and women singing, there was partying, feasting.
It finally happened. And after their marriage, they go on sort of a honeymoon, traveling through the island until they reach Endunier. And when they reach Endunier, there's just a great feast that was prepared to them by Valendiel, which we learned earlier was family to Aldarion. And all the Westlands were there.
Yeah, literally everybody, because they all love Erendis. But the morning before all this feasting happened, Aldarion saw a ship sail out of the west. It was a tall white ship with white birds flying all around the sails.
And this ship was from Valinor.
Bum, bum, bum.
And a quick excerpt from The Unfinished Tales. Thus the Eldar graced the wedding of Erendis for love of the people of the Westlands, who were closest in their friendship.
Yeah, and they brought flowers and adornments for the feast. And when we say flowers and adornments, we're talking elvish flowers and adornments.
And not just elvish flowers and adornments, but elvish stuff from Valinor.
Yeah.
Which is 10 times cooler than anything you can get in Middle-earth.
Yeah, and I'm feeling that they brought some pretty good booze, too. I don't know about you. I bet.
Yeah, they probably brought some pretty crazy elvish booze. They brought minstrels and singers, and they sang a ton of songs about the elder days, Gondolin and Nargothrond, and the heroes of the Edain. They always remember this shit.
Yeah, and they also brought hella presents. To Aldarion, they gave the sapling of a tree. The bark was snow white, and its stem was strong and straight as steel. They actually asked Aldarion's like, I bet you could make a good ship out of this. And they were like, we don't cut them down. We have them for our flowers.
He looks at the white tree, and he's like, oh, this is a real cool tree I could build something on.
Yeah. And to Erendis, they gave a pair of elven birds, and they're songbirds, and they had gold feet and beaks. And they sing constantly, and the cool thing about them, they don't repeat cadences. So they essentially
have an ever-changing song?
Well, they compose their own music.
Oh, okay. These are some really sweet birds. Yeah, the Eldar spoke to the birds and basically named Erendis as their master, and they followed her wherever she went.
So at this point, they leave Endunier, and they travel back to the king's house in Armenelos.
2 years into their marriage, Erendis conceives a child, and she bore Aldarion a daughter, whom they named Ankelime.
And later, she becomes the first ruling queen of Númenor, and she's said to be the most beautiful woman in the line of Elros, period.
And this made Erendis very happy because she figured that meant that Aldarion would stick around to try to make a son heir so that they actually had an heir to the throne.
Mm-hmm.
She figured that would be on his priority list.
Yeah, a true anchor baby, as it were.
Yeah, because at this time the law was that the eldest male nearest in kin was the one that inherited the throne. But ultimately Erendis still fears that sea longing in Aldarion, and she watches jealously anytime he goes and hangs out with his venturer buddies.
And at one point, he actually invited her to come to Ambar, and she had this like furious look in her eyes, and he was just like, "Oh, cool," and he never asked about it again.
Okay, so you don't want to come hang out with the Venture Bros.
Bros.
So after 5 years ashore, Aldarion finally goes back to his forestry business. He needs something to do. So he was often away for days at a time, and but because of his efforts, Númenor was pretty much set for lumber.
And he also starts getting back into shipbuilding, and he has this great vision for a ship, and it has sails as great as clouds and had enough stores for a whole town. And they straight up built it in Romania, and they called it Turum Fonto, which means the wooden whale.
And he kind of did this on the down low.
Let's not tell the wifey about it.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, there's some old wounds with the whole sailing and building new ships business. So he doesn't tell Erendis about it, but nonetheless, she hears about it. I mean, how can you really keep a ship that big a secret?
Yeah, the wooden whale? What is that giant piece of wood out there, Aldarion?
Yeah, it looks like a city.
It looks like there's stores enough for a whole town in there.
Yeah, so one night, basically, when they're having dinner, she passive-aggressively brings it up, and she basically starts sort of talking shit through a smile at him.
Yeah, you know how people do that. That's very common in Minnesota. She's like, "So are there any trees you didn't cut down today then, hon?" Like that. Like, she's very passive-aggressive.
Yeah, she's pretty upset about all the cutting down of trees for this massive ship.
And Aldarion pretty much goes ahead and responds to her, "I need something to do while I'm stuck here."
And she's pretty pissed. I mean, you're stuck here? Oh,
yeah,
man.
he pretty much gives her the impression that he's stuck here.
Stuck here with her.
Yeah, you and your fucking daughter. It's not like you have a family, Aldarion. When Calame was only 4 years old, Aldarion tells Erendis that he wants to leave again.
Yeah, he basically sticks around until her birthday of that year, and he makes a big deal out of it.
And she's sad that her father's leaving, but she doesn't quite understand that he will be gone for a very long time.
Yeah, she's pretty young. I mean, she's only 4 years old.
Yeah.
And when he bids farewell to Erendis on this trip, she mentions how her years are waning while he is still young because he's from the line of Elros.
Yeah.
This difference in aging is finally starting to catch up with him.
And he's like, he tells her, he's like, "Look in the mirror. You're still young and beautiful. All I need is 2 years, babe. Just give me 2 years and I'll be back here."
And she agrees, very reluctantly, but she basically says, like, she really has a choice. She's like, fine. Like, did I really have a choice in this matter? Go get your 2 years. And he gets in his new ship. He built another new ship.
Yeah, another one.
And this one is called Hirilande, the Haven Finder.
And he leaves without the blessing of Meneldur or Erendis. There's no bow from Erendis. It's actually like one of his buddy's wives that does it, and he's super salty about it.
And while he's gone on this trip, Erendis becomes very hateful of not only the sea, but also now the trees.
Yeah, she resents...
Since that was his thing for such a long time.
She resents the trees now.
She used to love the trees.
See what love does to people, guys?
It's terrible. Don't fall in love.
It's poison.
And eventually she left their home in Armenelos and moved back to Emiria, where she was from. And she took her daughter and Calame with her.
And this is where Erendis really starts to get sour. She isolates herself and she starts to blame men for pretty much everything. And this is where our opening excerpt is from, in case up until this point you're wondering what the fuck that meant. This is what Erendis says about men. That's the opening excerpt.
Yeah, that's Erendis talking to her daughter.
Yeah. There's because like we said, the story's not finished, but after the more finished part of the narrative, Tolkien had written like a soliloquy or something that she had said, and it's fucking awesome. If you want to read it, it's super like man-hating and stuff, which is great in my opinion. We got a little.
It was very
from
bitter.
Yeah. But yeah, she isolates herself and her daughter from the outside world. There's only women around, and she aimed to bring up her daughter in bitterness towards men. This kind of reminds me of Great Expectations. Did you read that? I hate that book.
Oh, yeah. Not for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Remember Miss Havisham?
Yep.
Yeah.
She raises that girl.
Yeah, she Havishams the shit out of this girl.
Yeah, and at this point, she also dismisses the elven birds, and they sadly fly all the way back to Valinor.
Yeah, they're like, you don't want us here anymore? Fine. And so that's kind of the symbolic ending of their marriage. I'd say that's when she gave up on it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because as you'll see...
This is during that 2-year time, too, so she was just not happy with that. I mean, 2 years is a really long time. That's not okay. It's just not as long as some of his other trips.
Yeah.
But when the 2 years are about up, she returns to Armenelos by the wishes of the king. So I guess she's there for him when he returns. And then when 2 years kind of comes and goes and he doesn't return, that's when she's like, nope, no, we're done with this. And she just moves back home and never leaves that part of the island again.
And she never tells Encalime anything about her father, not even his name. And she just makes it look like we were abandoned. Like, he's never coming back.
That's more or less what it is at this point. But Aldarion does return. When Encalime was 9, Aldarion's ship was spotted coming into the harbor.
So yeah, he was supposed to be gone for 2 years. He comes back 5 years later.
Yeah, that's over twice as long.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no one to be seen to greet him when they returned. And he rode to Armenelos and found that his old house was shut and kind of boarded up, and he was not happy about it.
So he goes to see Daddy. That's where he goes. And Menelduer's super, super cold to him, like colder than he's kind of ever been. And he talks to him like he would talk to... he talks to him as a king would talk to a captain, which I'm imagining he's kind of talking to him like he's an employee.
Right, yeah.
Not his son, but an employee.
Yeah, and his dad tells him basically to go home to his wife in Emiria, over on that part of the island, because that's where she went when you were gone for so long.
Yeah, he actually says, he's like, you should go home to your wife. Or he's like, go home. There's even an exclamation point. There's not many exclamation points in Tolkien, but there is in this sense. He says, go home. And Aldarion's like, I'm not really sure where that is now. And it's kind of a sad moment where he's like, she's in Emiria, go back there.
So he goes, and he does meet Erendis. And she tells him she stopped expecting him back, and she made no preparations for him. And she doesn't join him for dinner, and she makes him sleep out in the guest room. She is not happy.
Yeah, she's not cool with this. The next day, Aldarion, he prepares to leave for Armenelos. He's really pissed off. He's like, all right, fine.
She's like, I get it.
Yeah, I get it. Like, loud and clear. Gotcha. But he also orders his daughter to be brought back to Armenelos.
Yeah, even though when he meets his daughter has no idea who he is. I mean, her mom definitely didn't tell her who he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she had no clue.
So Aldarion returns to Armenelos and gives his father a letter from Gil-galad. This is a letter he brought back over from Middle-earth.
And the letter says that there's growing evil in Middle-earth, and that it's not just the regular evil. It says that it's not just the regular evil men problem. It's it's a servant of Morgoth that's risen again. And the letter asks them for aid in any way they can to help them defeat this new evil.
And we were talking about this earlier. You were telling me that this is the first time that Sauron is actually mentioned.
In the Second Age, yeah, as like the rising to power that he does, yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is the first time we hear that any evil lord is coming back since Melkor.
Yeah. So Meneldur was disheartened by the letter, but he decides that he will not make a decision, and that he's going to give the scepter to Aldarion and let him decide what to do.
Yeah, he was really stressed out about this decision. But, I don't know, pawning it off on his son seems kind of like a cheap move.
Yeah. It's kind of like, well, I don't know. It's like it reminds me of the Godfather when he says, he's like, I will not be the one that breaks the peace we made here today, knowing full well that he's going to tell his son to do it when he gives him the reins. Like,
gotcha.
Yeah. So he's just trying to alleviate responsibility. So this is kind of where the story of Aldarion the Mariner kind of ends. This is where we don't really have any more information about him. The narrative ends.
Yeah, we get up to the point where we introduce Sauron, and now there's an evil figure that needs to be dealt with, and the king passes kingship down to Aldarion, because he figures Aldarion will know what to do with it, and then the story ends.
Yeah.
It's quite a cliffhanger.
And what we do know is that Aldarion the Mariner, as king, sailed back to Middle-earth numerous times, and he aided Gil-galad in his struggle. We also know that Erendis and Aldarion stay estranged for the rest of their lives, and Erendis continues to be a hater till the end of her days. And like I said, there's that really long man-hating speech in the end of the story, in the end of the section, which is really cool. Everybody should check it out.
Yeah, the story in the Unfinished Tales kind of ends, but there's kind of like an outline of this way the story is supposed to end, and then Tolkien actually wrote out that speech.
Mm-hmm.
So we got that in at the end there.
Yeah, at least we have that. And also, she's one of the characters that it's kind of vague, but she takes herself down to Romena and throws herself in the harbor.
So she kills herself.
Yeah, it's kind of like not explicitly said, but it says that like people think she killed herself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a sad end to a long and sad story.
Mm-hmm. And it's really the story. It's an interesting story to look at because I bet you anything there's going to be two different ways to look at this story: the male perspective and the female perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's gonna polarize people. Like I used to hate Aldarion the most, and then I kind of read this. When I read this again, I kind of hate both of them now. I think they're both kind of selfish and they both kind of suck.
Yeah, but I don't think that there's any question that Aldarion was pretty inconsiderate throughout most of this.
Oh, true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And that's her point. Like he's the dude. They're always inconsiderate because they just do whatever the fuck they want to do.
But ultimately, Aldarion also dies in the year 1098 of the Second Age.
Yeah, and we just know when he dies. That's kind of it's in the annals of the kings. Like,
so he was 398, so almost 400 years.
Yeah, that's a hell of a run.
That is a hell of a run.
All right, well, guys, let's get to our favorite segment of the show. What did we learn on KOT?
Beautiful. So today we were talking about Aldarion the Mariner, Aldarion and Erendis. So we got to know the birth and early life of Aldarion and some of the voyages of Aldarion.
Yeah, we learned about his guild of adventurers, more voyages. And the story of Erendis, her background a little bit. And then we also, what else did we get into, Joel?
Well, we got to touch on the new growing threat of evil in Middle-earth, the first word of it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
We got to talk about the estrangement of Erendis and Aldarion.
And then we kind of ended on the origins of Anne Kalime and her upbringing of the...
Man-hating.
Yeah, man-hating and shelter, which ultimately, because she gets both sides of it, because she later lives with her dad, that like her mom instilled in her being a really strong woman, which is creates a great queen.
Yeah, she goes on, like we mentioned earlier, to be the first ruling queen of Númenor, and she rules for a particularly long time.
Yeah, like 400 years or something, right? Like
yep.
It's really long.
It's a really long time, which is pretty long in terms of the span of rulership that they have in Númenor. That was a pretty long time for one ruler. She was a really good queen.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's all we've got today on Aldarion.
That's all for today. This was a really obscure story.
I really like this, though, just because I like getting more from Númenor.
Yeah, I know. It's nice to hear. This is the only, like we said, this is the only story that comes on in Númenor. Mm-hmm. And it's just weird to be like, because you learn about the geography and stuff, it's just weird to be like, yeah, they went to Romena, and then they went over to Armenelos and like all these stuff. Like, you know, it's a cool story set in a cool place.
I like that we get to learn a little more about the culture of Númenor, too, just throughout the story.
Mm-hmm. Oh, also as a side note, I forgot to mention this when we were talking about it. Special thing about this story. In Erendis' hate speech in the end of the story, she explicitly mentions sex, which is the weirdest thing ever, because Tolkien, there's not sex mentioned really at all.
No, never explicitly ever.
No, like she says that they are for the desires, women are designed for the desires of men's flesh or something like that, to sate the desires of their flesh. And it's like, that's pretty explicit reference to
sex,
to carnal activity. And that really put me back that we found that in this story. It was weird. But yeah, that's something about the story too.
Yeah.
It's sexy.
The story is just kind of a little gem in his work.
But yeah, guys, thanks so much for listening. Make sure you follow us on all the social media. The Twitter, I run the Twitter. Joel runs the Facebook. Instagram is ran by nobody. No, yeah. But yeah, and YouTube. We got a YouTube channel. We've got all our episodes up there. We got all the videos we've ever made. So yeah, come check us out on YouTube if SoundCloud or you know, iTunes ain't your thing.
And don't forget to check out our newest account on Patreon.
Patreon.
Woo! Yeah, if you like to get some exclusive content, go check it out. It's really nice. Every penny really helps.
Yeah, and it's it's cool that you get exclusive content and whatnot. We like making the exclusive content. It's really fun. We have a lot of fun doing it. But really, more importantly, it's a way to help us do what we do, and it's a way for us to get funding from our fans for what we do, and it's really great. And we thank you for it because we've already got some patrons. So let's thank them. Thank you for donating to the Patreon, guys. We love you. But that's pretty much it, guys. I am and have been and will be Danny J.
And I have been and will continue to be Joel N.
And just as always, guys, remember, keep on Tolkien. Aure and Tuluva.